It started like every other Tuesday for Mark Deller, a 34-year-old warehouse supervisor who took the same shortcut home through a quiet residential block in Riverton. The sun was going down, the air smelled like cut grass and warm asphalt, and the streetlights were just beginning to flicker on. Then Mark heard it. Not a siren, not a car alarm. A thin, desperate crying sound, the kind that makes your stomach drop before your brain even figures out what it is. He stopped walking. The sound came again, high-pitched, strained, and shaky, echoing through the empty street like it was bouncing off concrete walls. Mark turned his head slowly, scanning for a kid, a dog, anything. Another cry. This time he knew exactly where it came from. A storm drain. It was one of those rectangular street grates near the curb with damp leaves packed into the gaps from last week's rain. Mark stepped closer and crouched. As soon as he leaned in, the sound hit him louder, like it was right beneath his knees. "Hey," he said softly, feeling ridiculous talking to a drain. "Hello?" Silence. Then a weak scratch, metal on concrete. And again, a small cry, like the animal was running out of energy. Mark's heart started punching his ribs. He pulled his phone out and turned on the flashlight, angling it through the grate. At first he saw nothing except darkness and a slick curve of concrete. Then the beam caught movement. A tiny face flashed in the light, fur matted, eyes wide, whiskers trembling. Mark sucked in a breath. It was a kitten. But not the kind you see in someone's backyard. This kitten looked like it had been down there too long. Its ears were flattened, its mouth opened in a silent mew, and its front paws pushed up against the wall as if it was trying to climb straight through solid concrete. Mark lowered the phone closer, trying to see better. And that's when he realized something that made the hairs on his arms stand up. The kitten wasn't alone. Behind it, deeper in the drain tunnel, were two more sets of eyes reflecting the light. 3 kittens, all trapped. Mark stood up fast, scanning the street for anyone. The neighborhood was quiet, just the hum of distant traffic and one porch light on across the road. He tried to pull the grate up. It didn't budge. He wedged his fingers into the edges until they hurt, pulling hard enough that his shoulders tensed and his palms started burning. Nothing. It was bolted. "Okay," he muttered, breathing out through his nose. "Okay, hold on." He called the first number that came to mind, his friend Tina, a veterinary assistant who always seemed to know what to do with animals. She picked up on the 3rd ring. "Mark, what's up?" "I'm at a storm drain on Meadow Lane," he said, words rushing. "There are kittens trapped under the street. I can see them. I can't lift the grate." There was a pause. Then Tina's tone changed, sharp, focused. "Are they moving? Breathing normally?" "They're alive," Mark said, watching the tiny faces flicker in and out of the phone light. "But they look bad, like tired." "Okay," Tina said. "Don't try to climb in. Those drains can be slippery and dangerous. Call animal control or the fire department. If it's urgent, fire department. Stay there. Keep them calm." "I'm staying," Mark promised. "I'm not leaving." He hung up and dialed emergency services, explaining quickly but clearly, animals trapped, storm drain, possible dehydration, need assistance. The operator asked for the exact location and told him help was on the way. Now he had to wait. And waiting felt like torture. Mark stayed crouched by the grate, shining the light down every few seconds to reassure himself they were still moving. The kittens pressed close to the wall, little bodies trembling, their fur stuck to their sides in damp clumps. A car rolled past slowly. Mark waved it down. The driver, a middle-aged man in a grey hoodie, lowered his window. "You okay?" "There are kittens in the storm drain," Mark said. "I called for help, but can you stay a minute? Just in case?" The man's eyes widened. He pulled over without hesitation. "Yeah," he said. "Of course." His name was Derek, and he lived 2 houses down. He'd heard the crying earlier, but assumed it was a cat in someone's yard. Derek knelt beside Mark, peering down. "Oh man," he whispered. "There's 3. Mark nodded. At least. Derek tried lifting the grate too, bracing his feet against the curb, pulling with both hands. The metal didn't move. "It's locked," Derek said grimly. "They need the city key or something." Minutes felt like hours. Then a woman came out of a nearby house in slippers and a cardigan, holding a mug. She looked irritated until she heard the crying. Her face changed instantly. "Oh my God," she breathed, hurrying over. "Are those babies in there?" Mark nodded. "Fire department's coming." The woman introduced herself as Mrs. Alvarez. She didn't leave. Instead, she went back inside and returned with a shallow dish of water and a towel. "Can we get water to them?" she asked. Mark hesitated. The grate gaps were narrow, but he remembered Tina's voice. "Keep them safe. Don't do something reckless." "Maybe just a little," he said. Mrs. Alvarez soaked the corner of the towel, then carefully pressed it against the grate opening so a few drops could drip down. The kittens didn't rush to it. They were too weak, but one lifted its head and opened its mouth like it could smell the moisture. Mark felt his throat tighten. "You hang on," he whispered. "Just hang on." Finally, a distant siren grew louder. A fire truck turned onto the street, lights flashing but not blaring. It stopped beside them with a hiss of air brakes. 2 firefighters jumped down, then a third, Lieutenant Harris, according to his jacket patch. He looked at the group gathered around the drain. "Where are they?" he asked. Mark pointed. "In there, 3 kittens, at least." Harris crouched, shining his own stronger flashlight through the grate. He nodded once, jaw set. "All right," he said. "We'll get them out." Mark expected it to be quick. Pry the grate, scoop the kittens, done. But Harris stood and looked around the street. "Any idea how far this line runs?" he asked. Derek frowned. "Storm drains connect under the street, probably to the retention ditch at the end of the block." Harris's expression tightened. "That's what I was afraid of," he said. "If there are 3 here, there might be more farther down. We need to check access points." Mark blinked. "More?" Harris pointed to the dark tunnel beyond the kittens. "These systems aren't just a pit, they're tunnels. If one kitten got in, the others could have followed. Or something pushed them in." The thought made Mark's stomach twist. "Let's start with getting these out," Mark said quickly. Harris nodded. "We will, but we're doing it safely." The firefighters brought out tools, crowbars, a specialized hook, and heavy gloves. One of them set cones around the area. Harris gave instructions, calm but urgent. "Watch your fingers. This grate is heavier than it looks." They wedged the tool into the edge and leveraged upward. The metal lifted half an inch, then stuck. They repositioned, pulled again. This time, with a groan of rust and grit, the grate shifted. Mark leaned forward, breath held. The opening widened enough to show the inside wall of the drain, wet, slimy, and steep. A firefighter lowered a small camera on a cable, checking the space. 3 kittens visible, he said. "They're against the wall. They look exhausted." Harris nodded. "Okay, we're going in with a grab tool and a towel. Slow, no sudden moves." Mark's hands were shaking, and he didn't even realize it until Mrs. Alvarez put a gentle hand on his arm. "They'll get them," she murmured. Mark swallowed hard. "I know." But as the firefighter lowered the towel, one of the kittens suddenly scrambled, panicking at the movement. It slipped, tiny paws skidding, and it fell backward into the darkness. Mark's heart dropped straight through his stomach. "Wait, did it fall?" he blurted. The firefighter froze, listening. A faint cry echoed from deeper in the drain. Harris's eyes narrowed. "It didn't fall far," he said, but his voice was serious now. "It ran back." Mark stared into the hole, cold creeping into his fingers. If one kitten could run back, how many others were already out there in the tunnels? And more importantly, why were they down there in the first place? Lieutenant Harris didn't waste time. "We can't just grab what's closest and leave," he said. If there's a way out down the line, we need to make sure there aren't more stuck or trapped. Mark's mouth went dry. But the others? We'll get them, Harris promised, and Mark believed him. There was something in the way the man spoke, steady, practiced, like he'd held far worse situations together with his voice alone. But we have to do this right. The firefighters repositioned their tools. One stayed at the opened grate, ready to extract kittens. The others moved down the street, checking for additional access points. Other grates, manhole covers, anything that connected to the same drainage line. Derek jogged along with them, pointing. "There's another one by the corner," he said, "and one behind the mailboxes." Harris nodded. "Good. Keep eyes open. If you hear crying, yell." Mark stayed by the original grate, flashlight still aimed into the darkness. 2 kittens were still visible near the wall, huddled together now, as if they'd decided the safest place was to press into each other. Mrs. Alvarez knelt beside Mark, her mug forgotten on the curb. "This is cruel," she whispered. "How do kittens end up in a drain?" Mark didn't answer because he was wondering the same thing, and because part of him was afraid of the answer. The firefighter at the grate lowered a towel slowly, inch by inch, letting it rest near the kittens. He spoke softly, voice surprisingly gentle. "Hey, little ones, it's okay. You're okay." One kitten sniffed the towel, then leaned forward, shaking. The firefighter used a small loop tool, like a soft catch pole designed for tiny animals, and carefully guided the kitten onto the towel. Then, slowly, he pulled upward. Mark held his breath. The kitten rose into the light, dirty, wet, and trembling so hard its whole body quivered. The firefighter lifted it out and immediately wrapped it in the towel like it was made of glass. "There we go," he murmured. "One safe." Mark's eyes burned unexpectedly. He hadn't cried since he was a teenager, but watching that tiny body finally leave the concrete hole cracked something in him. "Is it okay?" Mark asked. "Alive," the firefighter said. "Cold and dehydrated, but alive." He handed the kitten to Mrs. Alvarez, who cradled it against her chest instinctively. "Oh, sweetheart," she whispered, voice breaking. "Oh, you poor thing." The second kitten didn't come as easily. It flinched away from the towel, backing up, claws scraping, eyes wide like it expected the world to hurt it again. Mark recognized the look. Pure fear, the kind that isn't just instinct, but learned. "It's scared," Mark said quietly. Harris returned from down the street, hearing the tension. "What's the status?" "One out," the firefighter said. "Second still down there. Third ran deeper." Harris's jaw tightened. "Okay, we'll get this one. Then we go after the runner." The second kitten finally allowed itself to be guided onto the towel. It was lifted out, and Mark noticed something immediately. A raw patch on its side, like it had rubbed against concrete for too long, or scraped itself trying to climb. Tina arrived at that moment, breathless, ponytail messy, a small emergency pet kit in her hands. "I came as fast as I could," she said, and dropped to her knees beside the towel-wrapped kittens. She didn't waste a second. "Let me see." She checked their gums, their eyes, their breathing, murmuring facts as she worked. "Dehydrated," she confirmed. "Cold. They need warmth and fluids. No milk. Just warmth first." Mark exhaled, relieved she was there. Harris turned to Mark. "You said you heard crying. How long?" Mark swallowed. "Just a few minutes before I found them. But it could have been going on longer." Harris nodded slowly. "That's what I'm worried about." He gestured down the street. "We checked the next access grate," he said. "We can hear faint cries. There's at least one more kitten down the line." Mark's stomach dropped. "More?" "More," Harris confirmed. Derek rubbed his face. "How does that even happen?" Harris didn't answer immediately. Instead, he pointed to the curb where wet leaves were packed in the grate gaps. "Storm drains fill during rain," he said. "If these kittens were down there during a heavy storm, water levels could rise fast. They'd be swept deeper, or if the mother was moving them, and got interrupted." Mark felt a cold wave run through him. A mother cat. A mother cat could still be down there. Harris looked around at the small crowd that had gathered, neighbours on porches, a couple of kids staring wide-eyed from driveways. "Listen up," he called, voice carrying. "We're going to keep working this line. If anyone hears crying near another drain, tell us immediately. Don't try to open anything yourselves." The firefighters moved to the next access point down the street. Mark followed with Tina and Derek, unable to stay away. At the corner drain, Harris kneeled and listened. A faint, thin sound, barely audible over the hum of the fire truck. There it was, a kitten's cry. Harris's eyes hardened. All right, same plan. They worked the second grate open with more difficulty. It was older, rusted, and seemed glued into place by years of grit. When it finally lifted, the smell of damp concrete rose like a breath from underground. Mark leaned in, flashlight ready. His light swept over the inside wall, and froze. There, pressed against the curve of the drain, was a kitten even smaller than the others. Skinny, ribs visible beneath damp fur. But that wasn't what made Mark's blood run cold. Beside the kitten was something else. A plastic grocery bag, ripped open, tangled in debris, and inside the bag, visible in the flashlight beam, were clumps of fur and something that looked like torn fabric. Tina's voice went tight. "Oh no!" Harris stared down, face unreadable. "This isn't an accident," he said quietly. Mark's throat felt like it closed. "What do you mean?" Harris pointed at the bag. "Someone dumped something down here," he said, "and these kittens ended up in it." Derek swore under his breath. Mrs. Alvarez, still holding the towel-wrapped kittens, looked like she might be sick. The firefighter lowered a camera again, scanning deeper. "Kitten is alive," he called. "Moving, but weak." Harris nodded once. "Let's get it out." They extracted the tiny kitten carefully, and the moment it hit fresh air, it made a small sound, half cry, half rasp, then went limp in the towel. Tina moved fast. She pressed 2 fingers to its chest, feeling for movement. Then she exhaled hard. "It's breathing," she said. "Barely. We need to warm it right now." Mark's hands hovered helplessly. "What can I do?" Tina looked up. "Your car. Heat. We need warm air. Not hot, just warm. Can you start it?" Mark ran to his car like his life depended on it. He started the engine, turned the heat on low, and came back. Tina placed the kitten on his lap, wrapped in layers of towel. "Hold it," she instructed. "Your body heat helps too." Mark sat in the driver's seat, hands trembling as he cradled the bundle. The kitten was so light it barely felt real. Outside, Harris and the firefighters were still at the drain. Mark watched through the windshield as Harris pulled the torn plastic bag out carefully, placing it on the pavement. It wasn't just debris, there were signs of more kittens, and not all of them had made it. Mark's stomach twisted painfully. Harris spoke to one of the firefighters, then turned to Derek. "Derek, you said you live nearby," he said. "Any security cameras facing the street? Doorbell cams?" Derek blinked. "Yeah, I've got one." Harris nodded. "We need footage. If someone dumped animals here, we need to know when and who." Mark's hands tightened around the towel. This wasn't just a rescue anymore. This was an investigation. And whatever the answer was, it wasn't going to be simple. Night fully settled over Meadow Lane, and the street had turned into a strange scene. Firefighters working under the glow of truck lights, neighbours whispering in clusters, and Mark sitting in his car with a trembling kitten on his lap like it was the most fragile thing on earth. Tina leaned into the open window. "How's it doing?" she asked softly. Mark looked down. The kitten's chest rose and fell in tiny, uneven movements. Its eyes were half open now, glassy but present. "It's breathing," Mark said. "Still breathing." Tina nodded. "Good. Keep it warm. I'm going to check the other 2. Mark watched her move back toward Mrs. Alvarez, who was sitting on her porch step now, towels piled in her lap, 2 rescued kittens tucked against her chest. She looked like she'd adopted them in her mind already. Lieutenant Harris returned to the group, phone in hand. "We've got animal control en route," he announced. "And I just spoke to the city maintenance supervisor. They're sending someone with the right tools to access the main junction cover at the end of the block." Mark's heart thumped. There's still more down there? Harris's face tightened. "We can't confirm how many, but we heard crying deeper, and if there's a mother, we need to find her before she panics and runs farther into the system." Derek came jogging up, holding his phone out. "I pulled the footage from my doorbell cam," he said. "You need to see this." Harris took the phone, and the group clustered around. Mark stepped out of his car, careful not to jostle the kitten bundle, and leaned in. The video showed the street earlier that afternoon. It was bright, sun still high. A small car rolled down the curb slowly, an older sedan, light-coloured. It stopped near the storm drain. A person got out, hood up, face angled away from the camera. They carried something bulky. Then, in the clearest, most stomach-turning moment, the person set a plastic grocery bag on the curb, looked around, and, like it was trash, pushed it toward the storm drain opening. They lifted the grate just enough to shove the bag through. Then they got back in the car and drove away. Mrs. Alvarez covered her mouth with her hand. "No, no." Derek's voice shook with anger. "They just dumped it, like nothing." Mark felt sick. His hands tightened around the towel bundle until he realized he might be squeezing too hard. Harris paused the video. "Do we have a plate?" he asked. Derek zoomed in. The plate was partially visible, but blurry. Enough for a few characters, not enough to be certain. "It's not perfect," Derek admitted. "But maybe the police can enhance it." Harris nodded. "We'll pass it on." Mark swallowed hard. So they dumped kittens. In a bag. Into a storm drain. Harris didn't look away from the screen. "Yes," he said. "And if they dumped a bag with kittens, there's a good chance some crawled out before the bag went in, or the mother was nearby trying to retrieve them." Mark looked down at the kitten he was holding. So small, so helpless. It wasn't just sad, it was brutal. The city maintenance truck arrived next, a pickup with flashing amber lights. A stocky man in a reflective vest stepped out carrying heavy tools and a set of keys like something from a utility room. "Storm drain junction covers down by the retention ditch," he said. "If they're in the main line, that's where they'll end up." Harris nodded. "Let's move." The group travelled down the block. Firefighters first, then the utility worker, then Mark, Tina, Derek, Mrs. Alvarez, and a few neighbours who couldn't bring themselves to go back inside. At the end of the street was a shallow ditch with a metal access cover near a concrete opening where water would flow during storms. It looked harmless under the streetlights, just part of the neighbourhood's invisible infrastructure. Harris crouched and listened. Everyone fell silent. For a few seconds there was nothing. Then a faint, thin cry echoed from inside the concrete opening. Tina's eyes widened. "That's definitely a kitten." Harris stood. "All right, we open the junction. Carefully." The utility worker inserted a key tool and twisted. The cover groaned. Together, he and two firefighters lifted it away. A breath of cold, damp air rose from the darkness like a basement opening. A firefighter shined a powerful beam inside. At first it was only water, shallow, trickling, bits of leaves, plastic scraps, then movement, a kitten, then another. Mark's heart slammed into his ribs. There were two more kittens huddled on a narrow ledge above the trickle of water, barely keeping themselves dry. But deeper in the tunnel, where the light faded, there was something larger, a shape pressed against the wall. Harris's voice went low. "That could be the mother." Tina stepped forward, careful. "If it's her, we have to be gentle. She'll bolt if she panics." Harris nodded. "We're not grabbing, we're guiding." They lowered a soft carrier and a towel, and Tina, steady hands, calm voice, knelt at the edge and spoke into the darkness. "Hey Mama, it's okay. You're safe." The shape shifted. A cat's face appeared in the beam, eyes wide, pupils huge. She looked thin, exhausted, and protective. She wasn't running toward them, She was positioning herself between them and the kittens. Mark felt his throat tighten. "She's guarding them." Tina nodded, barely moving. "Good sign. It means she's not completely feral. She's just terrified." The two kittens on the ledge cried weakly, pressing against each other. One tried to stand and slipped, tiny paws scraping on damp concrete. Harris exhaled through his nose. "We have to get those kittens first," he said. "If one falls into the water line, it could get swept." The firefighter carefully extended a towel like a bridge to the ledge. Tina guided the kittens onto it with slow, tiny movements. No sudden grabs, no chasing. The first kitten stepped onto the towel, wobbling. Mark held his breath. The second followed, hesitant, then quick. The firefighter lifted the towel slowly upward, like raising a precious package. The kittens came into the open air, wet, trembling, alive. Mrs. Alvarez made a sound like a sob and reached forward instinctively, but Tina stopped her gently. "Let me," she said. "They're cold." Tina wrapped the kittens immediately, checking them quickly, murmuring reassurances. Now the only ones left were the mother cat and whatever was deeper in the tunnel. Harris leaned down again, beam steady. The mother cat backed up half a step, ears flattened, but she didn't run. She looked from Tina to the carrier, then back toward the tunnel like she couldn't decide what to do. Tina whispered, voice barely audible. "Your babies are safe," she said. "Come on, come with us." The mother cat hesitated. Then, slowly, she moved forward. Not running, choosing. She stepped closer to the carrier, sniffing the air. Tina held her breath, hand hovering, ready to close the door if she went in. The mother cat paused at the threshold, and that's when another sound came from deeper in the drain. Faint, small, desperate. A cry. Not the mother, not the kittens in Tina's towel. Something else was still down there. Mark's eyes widened. "There's another one," Harris's voice sharpened. "We're not done." The mother cat froze, then turned her head toward the darkness, as if she'd heard it too. Tina's face turned serious. "She knows," Harris nodded. "Then we follow her lead." Instead of forcing her into the carrier, Tina shifted back, giving the cat space. The mother cat stepped away from the opening, then looked back, like she was asking them to follow. Mark's heart pounded. A firefighter adjusted the light beam deeper into the tunnel, and there, barely visible behind a pile of debris, was a final kitten, stuck, too weak to climb, its fur soaked and clinging to its tiny body. The mother cat moved toward it, but she couldn't reach it without slipping into the shallow stream. Harris made a quick decision. "Hook tool," he said. A firefighter handed him a long, gentle grab tool with padded ends. Harris lowered it carefully, inch by inch, positioning it around the kitten without pinching. The kitten cried, thin, exhausted. Mark's hands clenched into fists. "Come on!" Harris tightened the padded grip just enough to support the kitten's body, then lifted. For one terrifying second, the kitten slipped, and Harris adjusted instantly, steady, controlled, bringing the kitten up and up and up. When it finally cleared the opening and hit the towel in Tina's hands, the kitten made one weak sound and then went still. Mark's breath caught. "Is it?" Tina's fingers were already checking. "It's breathing," she said, voice firm. "It's breathing. We warm it now." Mark realized his legs felt weak. 6 kittens. A mother cat. All of them pulled from concrete darkness because one person stopped walking and listened. Harris stood up, looking at the gathered neighbors. "We got everyone we could find," he said. "We're going to keep checking the line, but this looks like the full litter." Derek's jaw clenched. "And the person who dumped them?" Harris's expression hardened. "Police will handle that part, but you did the right thing getting footage." Tina looked at Mark, and for the first time that night, she allowed herself a small relieved smile. "You didn't walk past," she said quietly. "Most people would have." Mark looked down at the towel bundles, tiny fragile lives stacked in human hands. He swallowed, voice rough. "I just heard them. Mrs. Alvarez stepped forward, eyes wet. "Sometimes that's all it takes," she whispered. "Someone who hears." Under the streetlights, with the fire truck still idling and the night air cool against their faces, Mark realized something that made his chest ache. Those kittens didn't get saved by luck. They got saved because people showed up one by one and refused to leave. And somewhere in a camera feed, a person had tried to make them disappear like trash. But instead, the whole neighborhood saw what happened, and none of them would forget it.